AI is probably going to take your job.
Conflict is healthy. It actually makes us stronger leaders together.
80% of all traffic that comes to a website from a large language model shows up as direct if you look at Google Analytics.
Most companies think they have a sales problem or a marketing problem or a pricing problem. But what if the real issue is simply your sales leaders don't speak marketing, your CMO doesn't speak finance, and your CEO is chasing revenue like adrenaline while starving the business of oxygen? Today's guest has been part of more than 80 exits, led through $880 million in IPOs, and seen an $8.1 billion exit up close. He's watched companies scale cleanly. He's watched others quietly suffocate. So we're diving into something most leadership teams never say out loud. How much revenue are you leaving on the table because your leaders don't speak each other's language? And so here I am to welcome Kurt Uhlir, fractional CMO. Let's go. All right, everyone, welcome back to Revenue Rascals. And today I am so excited to talk about one of those acronyms called TAM, okay? And if you don't know what it is, or if you want to know more about how to, of course, operate underneath a TAM and make the most money you possibly can, then you're going to want to listen in today. So I have Kurt Uhlir here, and I cannot wait for you to listen to him. He has done all of the things, CMO, CRO, and right now he is a CMO, and we're going to take the perspective of course, how sales and marketing sometimes don't connect with each other. And today specifically, we'll talk about EBITDA and also TAM. So Kurt, you've seen companies scale from early traction to IPO and beyond. And when you walk into a mid-market company today, I want to know, what's the first sign that their leadership team is misaligned, even if their revenue looks strong? And of course, before you jump into the meat of the question, just tell us about who you are and how you got here.
Yeah, I'm known as that kind of growth marketer now. As I mentioned, I've been a CRO. I've been successful in 11 industries. We've helped take companies public, have major sales after there. But I've been part of more than 80 acquisitions at this point in funding rounds. But I started early, not realizing I was really good at sales and systems. I had to form 2 LLCs when I was 14 because on day 3 of selling lawn care businesses, my dad pointed out I had sold more lawns than I could fulfill full time. And so I actually ended up having to hire 2 full-time employees right away to deliver on that. And ended up finishing that first 6 months, having more than a dozen friends and 2 of their dads working for me full time on that lawn care business. I'm just really good at selling and using that momentum building that happens that I think we're going to talk about a little bit.
Oh my gosh, I absolutely love that. My son actually is 13, and last summer, he's like, Mom, I want to start a business. And I was like, well, there's 2 things that 12-year-olds can do, I think, really well around here. One is go pick up dog poop. Okay, so that's one. And 2 is clean out trash cans. So which one are you going to do? And so he ended up doing the trash cans with him and his buddy. And he did it all summer, and it was awesome. And I was so proud of him as a 12-year-old. But yeah, and they just rode around on their e-bikes with all of their tools and their buckets and everything on their back and knocking on doors. So, I mean, I'm raising entrepreneurs, Kurt.
Yep.
I love it. Okay, so let's talk about the mid-market company today. And the reason why I want to talk about that is the messy middle is pretty exciting to talk about. And at least I think it is. So once again, if you walk into a mid-market company today, what is the first sign that their leadership team for you is misaligned, especially when it comes to the communication between sales and marketing?
I will usually ask 2 questions, and if I don't get a good answer or the consistent answer between especially sales, revenue, sales, marketing, and the CEO, especially if those are different, things are sideways. The first is, can they tell us the difference between lead generation and demand generation? I say that because a West Coast company I just spoke to, they've raised almost $100 million. They're about to raise another $100+ million. Their CEO, former CRO, she's convinced those 2 things are the same, and they are very different. Ooh. And so that's one big problem because those aren't different. And the second thing is I want to know from the CEO, revenue, chief revenue officer, and marketing, how much they think of their resources are split into short-term, medium-term, or long-term. And for me, that's 2 to 12-month revenue, 12-month to 36-month revenue, and 36-month plus. Specifically on the marketing side, how much now the numbers can be zero in one of those, but if they can't give pretty consistent numbers, and usually they will not give any number because they do not actually split them up that way.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think out of my clients, I don't think they all could answer those two questions. I mean, in the beginning, I don't think they could. So, I mean, clearly we get there eventually, but from, the beginning, I don't think they could. So before my audience, though, let's not make any assumptions that everybody knows what we're talking about right now. So why don't you define the difference between the lead gen and the demand gen?
So from a lead gen is just literally how many people are you getting to come fill out forms, download ebooks, fill out that kind of gated content, set up a meeting with your team. So that's you basically getting contact information for people, one or more within a company. Demand gen on the other side is people are seeking out your brand, especially if you're in a new market, so that they're looking for you. I also kind of brought that into like too many marketers talk about like brand building, which is a meaningless term to me. And for me, it's around the concept of trust. Because from a demand generation perspective, and I think we'll get to this with that when we talk about total available market, is if you're not the largest brand in the industry or one of the top three, you have lost, and we'll talk about the research, a huge percentage of even the lead gen you get. So these companies don't know that, hey, you got 100 people to sign up on your website, whether through ads or traffic or whatever, or cold calls, and like 70% of those are never going to convert no matter what. That's what demand gen brings you, is so that you're even in the running after you've done all the work and it comes up to, will you sign this?
Oh my gosh, 100%. So I really like the way that you clearly described that. And I think we're in a trust recession right now. So right now, I think it's even actually more important than ever with all of the AI and saturation of the market and just the way things are changing right now. Trust is everything.
Trust is everything, especially, especially for these companies that are 7 figures, 8 figures. The people that are making decisions, whether they're smaller clients that are buying it or they're large enterprises, the individuals making the decision has a risk assessment. And what they're most concerned about right now is paying for or bringing in that bad egg. And so they will default to one of the top known solutions, even knowing it's going to be an average offering, just because, well, you could fail at this.
Mm-hmm. You know what's interesting? So I was listening to a podcast this morning. I produce podcasts and I also listen to a lot of them. And one thing, the podcast I was listening to, I'm blanking on the name, it'll come to me in a second, but her name is Louisa, and she is a researcher on anti-aging and brain health, preventing dementia, Alzheimer's, all of this. So her guests are really interesting. So one of the guests she had on today, what they were talking about is there was an independent company that went onto Amazon and bought 10 different brands of creatine gummies. So creatine is a supplement, and because supplements aren't regulated the same way in different ways, you never know what you're getting sometimes. So specifically with the gummies, the theory was that the production process of making a gummy actually kills the creatine. So there's no way to actually chew said gummy and get creatine in your body. So this lab went and bought all 10, tested all 10, and not one of the 10 had any creatine.
Oh, wow.
So, wow, when that gets published, I'm sure they're going to, and linking to all of these brands, what are we doing? It's the trust recession. It's so hard to know if you're making a good decision for yourself. So for me, when we're talking about lead gen and demand gen here, it's you better do things right, because one read of that article of your gummies don't have any active creatine. Oh my gosh, can you believe that, Kurt?
Yeah, think about it from the sales side. It's like nobody's going to, they used to joke, nobody gets fired for bringing in SAP. It's a horrible enterprise solution, but nobody gets fired for bringing that in. You're at a mid-sized business, like CRMs, choose Salesforce, choose Pipedrive. They're just going to work. Are there better solutions? Absolutely. But if you bring in one of those two, no one's going to complain later if things happen not to work out.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. Okay, let's jump into TAM, because I love this conversation. And when I saw this was something that you wanted to talk about, I was like, I definitely want to have him on my show. So you've said that most sales leaders unknowingly shrink their TAM by 10% because they don't speak marketing. Could you break that down for us? And what does that actually look inside a company?
Yeah, I kind of joke that it's like, sales needs to be bilingual or even trilingual. They need to be able to speak not just, their customer's language, but they need to be able to speak in terms of marketers because most marketers do not know how to speak in a way that salespeople connect with or that finance connects with. And so like as a CMO, I can speak in all those languages, but I understand most of my peers cannot. And so it is responsibility for this a sales team to make sure that they're translating things back and forth sometimes, trying to get the budget even for the marketing team, but let the marketing team do their own thing. And so if they can't do that, they can't ask the curious questions that they should be asking of their customers. They can't ask that of their marketing team to find out why they're wanting to do stuff. Or, God, you just keep talking about brand or social media. We sell B2B. Why? I don't care about social media. Well, no, you should. And I can walk you through that. And no matter what your solution is, yes, your customers are on TikTok or LinkedIn is still social media and YouTube is social media. And so it's like search everywhere. But as a sales leader, you have to be able to find out the why from your marketing team, the way you should be finding out the why from your customers as well, to actually get to that discussion, which hopefully your marketers are coming through, as I mentioned, those 3 time frames, because you should always have some resources dedicated to all 3 of those, but then be having different conversations along those different phases. As a CRO, we live and die. People live and die by the quarterly numbers and the annual numbers for bonus, but you're never going to get to the like crazy numbers you want to grow to in year 2 or 3 if you don't start putting some money towards or some effort towards that longer term momentum building.
Yeah, absolutely. So what does somebody do? When somebody's listening right now, they're a sales leader, maybe they're a founder, they're a CEO, and they hear us say that we're accidentally shrinking TAM by 70%. So what's the solution? What's the first thing somebody needs to do?
Well, the first thing, especially for the founders, where it's founder-led sales right now, is they need to be able to go to every single member of their team, not just their core leadership, and ask, hey, what are the business outcomes we're expecting from you to reach the business outcomes that I want for the company? And if each individual can't do that, if we'll go back to, let's say, a social media person, for example, if they cannot express the outcomes, not the activity, but the outcomes that we're wanting from their role and how that connects to the company's outcomes, well, you need to slow down. It's part of that. You have to go slow to be able to go fast, because how could you expect people to hit your expectations if they do not actually know the outcomes you're expecting from those activities?
100%. And every organization I've ever supported, I think connecting from the individual contributor to leadership and then making sure those goals do align and trickle down. And also, if senior leadership changes the goal, you should probably tell all the people. But that actually does not happen very often. And it's a lag. And so then you have the social media manager thinking they're doing everything they should. And all of a sudden the carrot's moved. And I've seen this over and over again.
Well, and you mentioned lag. It's too often, especially I find on the sales side, the sales leaders are only caring about lagging indicators. They're caring about, marketing qualified lead, sale qualified lead, how many meetings we have, what have it actually closed. And those are all way downstream from what you should be talking about these leading indicators and what's going to get you there. And like, let's just think about it in terms, we've all had this. We've all been on an email list with a brand that we love, and then something shifted and you just start getting all these emails from people and you hit unsubscribe. You've received and even opened their emails for years before and you hit unsubscribe. I can guarantee within that company, the person sending out emails is being tracked on not revenue. They're being tracked on how many emails are open, how many clicks. And so they will burn an entire list that's been developed for decades, perhaps, just to be able to say, well, I increased total clicks by 10%. Yes, but you got 35% of our loyal people to unsubscribe. So that should be a loss, but they were being tracked on clicks or opens.
Yep. Oh my God, that's a really good example. And I've seen that happen before. All of a sudden I'm like, whoa, this is a lot of emails. And it's like, I like you, but like, I need a little bit of a breather on my own email marketing. I guess as a protection layer, if I ever go through like a launch or a series of a lot of emails, I actually have at the bottom, you can unsubscribe, or, hey, you just need a little break, snooze for 30 days so that I don't lose them in these pushes. But yeah, we've all been there, and you're right, giving them, and that's another thing, like when I've gotten in a few battles with CEOs over SDR activity versus outcome. And there is an old school mentality, probably the same one that says clicks are better than sales, which mind blowing, right? It's like, okay, we got to have the strategy here. You cannot just rank an SDR and how many dials and emails they sent out. Like some people are far more strategic than, and they have more sales, better outcomes, more appointments, like all of these things. So I see that parallel of your email example on the SDR side all the time.
Yes, absolutely. For me, what comes down to is both like private equity backed companies struggle with this much more than others, but a lot of times companies that are 7-8 figures, they get into it and they didn't realize that they got into it. They focus on attribution over contribution. And so that's what ends up being like, hey, right now with the shift from organic search being so large to large language models, well, the research says when they look through it, that something like 80% of all traffic that comes to a website from a large language model, which is actually much more valuable than the traditional traffic, but up to 80% of it shows up as direct if you look at Google Analytics. And so I actually have a post coming out on LinkedIn about that tomorrow and quoting some of that research. Well,
will you tag me in that tomorrow, please?
Yes,
I want to make sure that I read it. And I'd like to share it because that just made my jaw drop.
Well, and so the matter with that is if you're just looking at your Google Analytics, you're going to say, well, large language models, then they're not that valuable to us, or should we be putting more or less? On the other side, it's ads. We're also seeing pay-per-click ads getting a lot more credit right now, but especially on the B2B side, your brand has been exposed within that large language model. The customer's gone through much of that journey, and then they clicked on the ad, so the ad is actually getting more credit because Google's really good at getting credit. And so that's attribution. That's versus coming back later with your customers and doing a contribution piece that walks through to say, how did we actually win this? How did you get to being a loyal customer, both on day 1 and day of 5? Or in year 5, because I do care about like reducing churn as well. And so most people aren't doing that. And you usually do have to have the marketing team be able to step in and do it's a little bit more qualitative research, but to be able to back it up as well.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm blanking on the name of the company that I ended up signing up for, but it is basically SEO for large language models. So I put my information into this platform and it helps me get promoted, like the podcast. When people go to search, like, oh, what podcast should I listen to about sales, revenue, business growth? And it's interesting that you say the attribution's off because I go into their platform and it's not the results that I would love, but I am getting more traffic. So for me right now, I'm like, gosh, maybe it's an attribution, what you just said.
Well, and it also depends on what that source is and over what time period. So like there's a lot of AI slop right now. There's so many companies that are out there that will do what you just said. And like maybe 70% of them, you'll see a spike that starts happening in traffic. And then about day 90 to day 120, it'll just tank and go off and will never recover. And it's because there is so much AI kind of slop that's out there. Some of it does it really well, but because of that, it's like there's a lot of noise out there and it's become more and more difficult, I find, for companies. And so actually smaller companies, these 7 and 8 figure companies can be a lot more nimble because when these funds, these growth stage venture funds, these private equity backed funds, they're running with playbooks that they thought and that they still think in a lot of cases have been successful, and they were successful 15 years ago, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. But if you start bringing in like those same playbooks into something today, like the companies aren't going to go well. Like, so let's just say, what do most private equity backed companies do? They hire somebody from the same industry. Well, that's how your marketing and sales will sound very generic and just like everything else, because you've hired a sales leader or a marketing leader that's been in 11 of your company competitors. Well, no, you want somebody who's been in multiple industries at this point, who has seen this adaptability as technology's changed, and put him or her in as your sales leader right now.
Yeah. And I have a goal. I want to see how many different things I can sell in my life. So I mean, like yourself, where you said 11 different industries, I'm probably pretty close to that. I should actually probably write them down and document them. But for me, I find it so incredibly exciting and interesting to take the knowledge I have from all of the different industries and apply it to that organization. Recently, I had one of my first scientific companies as a client. So they sell disposables directly to labs. I'd never done that before. And I told them during the sales process, nope, never worked in this industry before. And I said, and this is why that is a good thing and why you should hire me. And so they hired. And it absolutely helped the organization when it comes to approaching sales and their sales process in a unique way that they didn't know that they could do before. So I love that. That's amazing. Another thing that I want to talk about is securing budget money to do the things you need to do. So when the CMOs specifically, so let's focus there. Why do so many CMOs struggle to secure budget when they need it? And what are they missing? How should they change the communication to both the CEO, the CFO, CRO, and all the other leaders?
Yeah, great question. First of all, they need to approach things differently. I would say the vast majority of CMOs now, they step into roles knowing that they will be replaced every 18 to 24 months. And so they won't tell you this, and they may not even realize they're doing it, but they're not playing to win for the company. They're playing to keep their job and hopefully stretch it out to 36 months. And so because of that, they're not forcing the discussion into those 3 timeframes that I mentioned. And they're not forcing sometimes it should be healthy confrontation, but the discussion that says, no, it can be 1% or 5%, but we do need to have some percent of our resources that are spent towards this longer term 36 plus month timeframe and that next 12 to 24 months. But when they step in up front and they're like, hey, I know I'm just going to be replaced in 2 years. Well, that's all they do is play to win. And so that's a problem. Because they often, especially smaller companies, they're not taking the time on that to do that up front and then say, let's agree on what the leading indicators are going to be that show that we are on the right path and making wise decisions. And especially at 7 and 8 figure companies, say, we're going to keep changing this. You are going to keep changing the goalpost, but we're going to come back and revisit in each of these 3 timeframes and not just be like, well, we were focused on X up front, and then you all shifted, but you didn't shift the numbers that we're tracking. And so when we got to 12 months later, you're like, well, why didn't we hit X? Well, because you told me to shift to Y and Z.
Yep,
and so that's
100%.
a huge bit of it. And the other side is they don't think in terms of controlled risk. CFOs and CEOs usually think in terms of controlled risk. Hey, not everything's going to work, but if I make this bet, what's the likelihood that it's going to come out? To your point, you can go into some of these solutions or agencies and they'll help get you placed in large language models. Well, if you don't know how to vet through that, some of them could burn your brand. So if you're a $50 million company and you're making a major shift against content and a go-to-market plan that's been working, and you're going to make a major shift to say, hey, let's go put all of our eggs in this basket. Is this going to work? Well, if that burns your brand, you just lost $50 million a year in revenue. That might not be a wise decision then.
Yeah, absolutely. How does a CMO get better at communicating controlled risk to the CFO? What are some tips on that communication? And I would really like to hear your perspective on it. I've gone to battle with a lot of CFOs, and I think I've got most of it down, but I'm really curious to hear from a CMO perspective some tips you would give to those that are listening.
It does help for me because I have a master's in financial engineering, so I can code out black permanent employee.
Okay, so then that's actually amazing. What a great compliment to be in a CMO. That's great. I love that.
It's the systems thinking that it takes to be successful. I think in go-to-market or even sales today at things is we think in terms of systems, and that's not the traditional background of somebody who was in sales or marketing. But because of that, they should be reading. First thing a CMO should do is if they're having problems with the budget, they should go read 8 to 12 books written for CFOs and take the time to understand them. You can do that really quickly with Audible books and then go through them a few times as well. But for me, the core thing is actually you have to have a mastermind, a group of non-CMO peers that you're part of. So I'm part of both a virtual group, which is about 200 of us that we get together weekly of, and a group here in Atlanta where, yes, there are other CMOs, but it's shoulder to shoulder time with CFOs and general counsels and sales leaders that I can go to. And I will do this time. It's all very transparent. And it's like, look, I just need 15 minutes to pitch what I'm going to do to the board at our company. And I'll go through really quickly because I don't always have close relationships with given the size of some of the groups. But I'll tell them, here's what I'm going to pitch. And why would you not give me budget? Or what questions does this raise? Or what fears does this raise? And just get that strong feedback that comes where we have it set up to where I don't ask questions back when people mention that to kind of like save face, the only questions that I can ask is curiosity about why did you ask that? What did you mean by that? Because I'm going to take that and go lead. But we have general counsels, we have CFOs that come in and say, hey, when I push back and I shut down on this, like, how is that actually bad for my company? How is it bringing in unbound risk that I wasn't aware of?
Yes, and I think that business acumen for just a basic, just a basic category here, any leader, any seller, any marketer, it's a huge gap when it comes to selling too. So for example, that company I was just speaking to before, that was something we really worked on is like, let's be able to talk their language and what matters to them and not just your value proposition, because your value proposition actually isn't very powerful if you can't connect it in the same language to the person that you're selling to. So, it's a catch-22 there. So I'm right there with you. Go read all the books, get in the rooms with people that can give you all the pushback so you can get better at it.
Well, and to your point, it's the connecting to the person for both the value props that they have, but at their role in the company and for them as individuals as well. Like I just mentioned, like if you're selling things to CMOs, like just imagine like 90% of CMOs at companies that are $25 million and plus, all they're doing is trying to protect their job. And so if you're aware of that, the value prop of what you're selling and solving, yes, it may solve it, but who is it going to solve it for the person that you're selling to as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think that is so incredibly mission critical. And also these marketers, the CROs and the CSOs also have that 18 to 24 months. So it's like all the revenue leaders are just trying to keep their role. And I want to say that as loud as possible because this is a major problem. Like it has to be fixed. You need leaders to be able to have longer tenure, and there's so many reasons why it doesn't work out, but it's really frustrating, and I'm sure you've experienced that before as well. So
it's frustrating, and it's also what I'm scared about for so many companies and owners of companies right now, and that includes like large funds, is like there's so much changing with AI that they're not providing enough margin for their leaders to push back on what the CEO or the board thinks AI is capable of doing. You mentioned about like SDRs. Yes, there's a pure SDR push, but then there's all these companies coming in with AI virtual, complete virtual SDRs. Well,
yeah.
like, can those solutions be good? Yes. Can I replace a lot of my marketing team and content team with AI? Yes. Can I do what most of the AI companies are pitching with AI? No. Like it brings unbound risk in. And so it's like you want me as your CMO, your fractional CMO, to tell you, here's what the reality is. And let me come back with proof points on it rather than just, well, you read a TechCrunch article or you heard from somebody else. And so you spin up everybody on like an AI agent product like MindPal, which can be good for some things, but dear God, don't let it write articles or like any outbound content for you.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And for me, it's, I don't know, maybe I just don't want to admit that perhaps sales will be taken over by AI, but I actually, in my gut, just know there will always be a place for humans, maybe not in all of the categories that are today, but I do think the humans will always be needed. The most recent project I had where I built out their BDR team from scratch, we did a hybrid model. So we had one AI seller, one AI sales agent, and then we had two BDRs. And so the way that we built it was let's grab the easiest ones to grab and to convert with AI, and then what can't convert then got sent off to the humans, and it had great success. And and that way we saved a lot of money. And so I typically would have built a 6 or 7 person team for this size organization, and I only needed 2 plus AI. So clearly, huge cost savings to the company with even better results. But you don't know what you don't know, so you have to hire the right people so you don't step on the landmines that you would prefer not to step on.
Absolutely. And so much is about testing what works and things that are shifting too. Like to your point, like sales is changing, marketing is changing. And so like now it's search everywhere optimization. You have to show up in YouTube. You have to have content leaders that can repurpose content and do video. And hey, like I know how to produce a fully AI powered audio only podcast that is indistinguishable from something with a person. And it's great. But most of them you hear, it's AI slop, and you kind of hear that come out. So you can do so much of these things right. So that is, how do I test things and then dive in much more on what works?
Yep, absolutely. And that's why I have a video podcast. so that people know it's real. I know you can create video avatars, but I believe that you can still tell the difference. So I'm locking in and making sure we're going
Oh,
on YouTube.
absolutely. Anything from HeyGen or Descript or anything, it's like, it's not a person.
Yeah. Did you hear about the law that got passed in New York that said if you use an AI generated character, human character, you now have to disclose it actually in the ad, not even the landing page by law. And so unless you're going to exclude everyone who's in New York, everyone's going to have to abide by this. And so I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, although, the FCC has had for years, like when somebody has an affiliate link, they're supposed to put like hashtag ad in like their tweet or their Facebook post. And so many people don't as well, but we'll see where it goes. I agree with you though, that there is a personal connection. And for me, AI is a huge force multiplier, but on the other side, it also like there's a lot of very average or below average marketers and salespeople. And I'm sorry, I outperformed you before. I'm going to really outperform you now. And AI is probably going to take your job.
Yeah. 100%. If you don't like when I left the project of that team that I had built for the BDRs, I looked the 2 human BDRs in the face and I said, your job security is in your ability not just to book the appointments after AI cannot, but how well you can manage the results of the AI. So this is mission critical because your job is hybrid. And if you can't get the AI tool I have now trained you on how to use to work, you do not have the same job security as somebody else, period.
Right. Well, like on the content creation side, when I was leading things for eXp World Holdings that owns eXp Realty, we had 30 plus people on our internal content team plus external content teams as well. I can now do that with 2 to 3 people. But if I really want to be better, what I need to do is I shift them to much more editorial roles and I train all my workflows and but you will never turn it loose completely. But these people become editors and they can outperform a 30-person team in the past now. If you give me the permission to shift properly, and sometimes people put too many handcuffs on, they're like, well, I don't want to have AI generated content because they've had a bad experience. Well, let's walk through and let's test, because I almost guarantee if you let me actually put up my guardrails the way that we create things in workflows, you will not be able to tell that AI created 95% of what was done, and then humans came through at the end. And it will always be brand consistent as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The M dash. Oh my gosh. Okay. So M dashes clearly generated by AI, but my mom's a court reporter. That was her job before she retired. You're supposed to use the M dashes. It's actually proper English. So I have to now remove my M dashes I would have naturally put in because I'm like, no, people think it's all AI. I'm like, no, this is so funny. But anyway, just a little grammar joke there on AI. All right. So let's talk about adrenaline and EBITDA. I love that you put this up as something that you like to talk about. I thought it was a really fun topic. So you described revenue as adrenaline and EBITDA as oxygen. Super powerful, but help my audience understand that relationship. And also please define EBITDA because that's usually the quiz that everybody has to answer.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it all matters about earnings before income and taxes. And so I'm on the board for a company where I put the co-founders together in the streaming space. It's a SaaS product in the streaming space. Top line from a sales perspective, they make an obscene amount of money because instead of paying a creator, if you like a show, or a streamer, instead of paying them through TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, any of the ways or YouTube donate there, you can use their platform alongside of that. And instead of say YouTube taking 50%, the platform only takes 10%. So it's way better for the creator. You're wanting to support them, way more goes to that person. But it means they generate $10,000 at the top line revenue, but they pay out 90 to 95% out the bottom, or right away to the creators. So it's like that they're not earning $10,000 there; they're earning $500. And so at the end of the day, it does matter. You grow long term and you are able to protect the people that work at the company as well as those that has funded it by how much money is being left from a profit perspective. I don't necessarily believe in profit first. I do just care about we need to be tracking what profit looks like. To get to real substantial profit growth, you do have to build towards that. You have to invest. You have to build momentum. It doesn't just happen. You can't just make a bunch of sales calls or clear through everybody that's in the CRM and 10x your revenue today. That's going to take building over time, and that's going to take investment. But so that's the difference. And most salespeople, for better or worse, They're tracked on top line sales. And
Yeah, they
so
are.
I like it much more when the CROs and the CMOs are, we have some combination. It's both top line revenue and we have an EBITDA on the bottom as well.
Yeah, I did an episode a few weeks ago about churn and how it, and exactly what you just said basically is yes, it's so exciting to sell and it's so exciting to get that rush, the adrenaline that you're saying, and all of this. But you know what's interesting to me is typically speaking, the salespeople, the sales leader, their compensation packages are way more than anyone in customer success or on the background or on the back who are there to make sure that they don't lose the customer because all of the money is in the longevity, the LTV of that customer or client. And I actually, in this episode, I'm like, I think this needs to be revisited because if the profit opportunity and the lifetime value is held with a completely different group, like, are we compensating in the right way? And I think that's food for thought. I don't know if there's one answer for every company, but customer success or anybody on the back end is so mission critical.
Yeah, well, you mentioned, I agree with that entirely. You mentioned churn. Let's just think about a large customer has churned. Why did they churn? If you're thinking in terms of back to that attribution versus contribution that I mentioned, well, contribution is going to say this person, this company, this customer churned, and why? Was it because sales sold something we don't actually have yet and we weren't delivering it? Did product not actually deliver? Did customer success not onboard them properly or solve support issues? Or did marketing set up bad expectations early on that just, yes, sales was able to force close, but still ended up, that's why they churned in 2 years. If you don't come back and actually reevaluate some of that, you won't be able to diagnose what's actually going on. And you're potentially going to just give attribution for that churn to the wrong person, whether it's customer success or too often sales gets the left with, well, you all sold stuff that we don't have. Well, maybe marketing set the bad expectation. Maybe product didn't actually deliver, but you have to have a process that comes back and doesn't act defensively, that just says, like, let's go through the last 10 people that churn and walk through why.
Yep, I think that's so incredible. And like the answer could be different it will be different for every company. I was at a trade show a while back and I started chatting with a product guy, and he's, been with lots of different companies. He was really fun to talk to. And I told him what I did and things that I focus on. And he's like, I've never worked for a company where any of the leaders would come and talk to a product like that. Ever. Like, we just get like fix-it requests or development requests. Like, we're never informed on why we lost a client. And were we responsible for it? Where was the disconnect? We have no communication. I have no idea. So all I do is what they tell me to do with the product with no connection to revenue or, where we missed the mark. And I was like, wow. Like, I don't know if you're just one guy saying that, but that's pretty potent. And that's a major problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's one of those things where I find companies that are 7 figures, 8 figures, they're founder-led sales, like where they tend to go sideways on things is they keep hearing work on the business, not in the business. Mm-hmm. But on the other side, they're trying to hand off what they do from a sales perspective. And it's like, no, like there is some portion of your time, I feel like, if you've been the driver for sales, where, and especially if you're just the owner or CEO, like I want the CEO of a $100 million company to take some sales calls, himself or herself. I want them to call some customers that have churned and talk to them. I want them to answer 5 Zendesk tickets on a monthly basis, just to know what that's like, so that there's still some reality. And then also, like, from a sales perspective, if you're taking sales calls, you should be recording them or having other people sit in on them. Like that's part of what should be happening, is so that, like, if you've got your company to $15 million in sales because you're the founder and you can just close every sales thing, well, don't just jump out once you think you've trained somebody. Come back in and say, hey, I want to do this next to you for the next hour. And people will always learn more than what your SOPs and your scripts say when they're watching you do this, if you are as good as you were to get there.
Oh my gosh, I couldn't have said it better myself. I help a lot of founders exit the sales seat. That is like one of the niche things that I do. But usually they come to me after several failed attempts. and it happens all the time. So I'm actually releasing an episode in a couple of weeks where I had a founder actually volunteer for me to talk about his 4 failures of trying to hire his first salesperson and why they all failed. And then we're going to work behind the scenes for 6 months to fix it. And the part 2 is going to come out of yada da. Here we go. This is what we did for, the successful exit of the founder. So I'm really excited for that. But it's a difficult transition from founder-led sales into hiring your first, founding account executive, for example, or your SDR or your BDR, and then growing that. And, most founders do it because they're so overselling. They're like, I just don't want to sell anymore. I want to work in the business, like all of these other things. So they get really excited the second they get a seller that they have confidence in. And they do exactly what they shouldn't do, which is what you just talked about, is they're no longer in the process and they don't know what's happening and they lose the pulse. And, you might have a rep that is going to be successful for a handful of months and then they fall off and then you have no idea because you let them to their own style, their own methods, everything over those 6 months. So
absolutely. Well, and I find there's also information that you get that you cannot get from Firefly notes or Fathom notes from listening in sales calls. Like you cannot outsource the feedback you will get from customers. And like I step into companies that are $50 million, $100 million, and they think they have the ideal customer locked down. And I'm like, no, what's holding you back from adding a 0 to the end of your revenue is the fact that you actually do not have it dialed in yet. And if you're humble enough to be open to that, we will fix that. And founders lose that. CEOs lose that when they just outsource it. And especially now, you can get notes from Fathom across your entire sales team. Well, no, you actually need to be talking to some people directly, or you need to just be listening in, but don't listen in to critique your salespeople. Listen in to take notes on what they're not hearing from the customer when they're talking about, because that's what you actually need to learn from.
Yeah, 100%. One fun thing I did with a client, and I loved this. So it was in-person sales meetings. So they were not remote. And that the pushback always comes, how am I going to record the call, if it's an in-person meeting versus, otherwise. So anyway, we ended up installing Otter AI on all of the iPads that they use in the presentation. Clearly, we get consent for recording, all of that. However, what I did is I had Otter actually search through every single sales call to answer specific questions so that the leaders could go in and quickly get like a recap. And the questions were like, for example, one of the questions it was a competitive one. Like the reps were asking competitive questions and all the summaries came in. So to your point, it is helpful and it gives you that high level information. But I would also be like, hey, these are the 3 sales calls this month I want you to listen to. Like, don't skip, don't look at the notes, but these are the 3 and there's reasons why, and I need you to listen to them. And, and I even got the CFO at that organization to start listening to them, which was like fascinating to me because I've never had a CFO sign off on that. But it's absolutely mission critical. And I couldn't agree with you more. Every sales leader has good intentions of doing call review, but it actually never happens. You have this sense of guilt as your reps wait to get your feedback. So you randomly grab a 30-second snippet of a call and feel good about yourself. Yet it doesn't actually solve the problem. It just tells your reps you checked it off your to-do list. This was my life as a sales leader before I discovered Objectionly. Objectionly is an AI software that reviews every sales call to deliver the truth about why more dials aren't turning into set appointments and why more demos aren't ending in a lovely wire transfer. You can see each rep's biggest problems, the moments in every call that it happens, and immediately click into these moments to watch them. Get every sales call scored against your sales script to see what went wrong in every dial or closing call and what needs to be done differently to improve. No more sales call marathons late into the night when the numbers are bad to find the issue. No more asking sales reps what their problems are and getting opinions instead of facts. Just clear insights on how the team is doing in seconds without spending hours doing following call review. Go ahead and cancel your 3-hour time block on your calendar for call review today, because in the next 5 minutes, you can upload a sales call and immediately see why your reps are losing easy to win deals. If you want this for your sales team, click below and watch a short 3-minute video on how it works and try it out on a free 14-day trial. Kurt, you've been part of over 60 exits. Do I have that fact correct?
Probably more than 80 exits and or funding rounds at this point. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, you are collecting exits at this point. So what patterns separate the companies that scale cleanly from that 5 million to 50 million and those that stall? And I'm asking specifically for that number because most of my listeners are trying to make that reach right now from 5 million to 50 million.
There's a few things. So one of them is, and this kind of goes against the like know who exactly you're hiring, but the companies that make that jump, they are hiring athletes over just specific positions. And so they're hiring a CMO, they're hiring an email marketing person who could do lots of roles. They can do that role, they're trained for it. But as a CMO, I should be able to step in and take sales calls and be as good or better than your average salesperson, and vice versa for that. And so things are changing so quickly, but especially at the companies you mentioned size-wise, you have to hire people that could theoretically have multiple and wear multiple different hats if something happened. And so that's a big thing for people that are stepping up right now. And the other part is that these people have to be okay with healthy conflict, because at that stage, we should be butting elbows so much where I should be, if we're a technology company, I should be as the CMO stepping in and having very strong opinions that I'm holding loosely about the product. You should be stepping in and saying, you're not positioning it well, or we're building these things and people don't care. Sales, the same thing. We should be getting into each other's spaces a good bit. And usually people are hiring like a head of sales that's going to sit in their lane and not necessarily go talk to product too much. Like, no, like we should be, like I said, butting elbows a good bit on this.
Yeah. I mean, I actually love conflict, so maybe I'm a strange person, but...
Well, you're a salesperson. So, I mean, that's kind of the nature of things. It's
true. It's so true. I mean, even in my personal life, I'm like, we've got a problem. We need to solve it, right? Like, let's just go ahead and do this. And so many people, most people actually are terrified of conflict, terrified. And I'm just like, no. It's okay. Conflict is healthy. It actually makes us stronger leaders together. We can make better movement. Radical candor as feedback. Like, I love that model. It's super simple. I remember early in my career, I was always comfortable with conflict, but I wasn't necessarily that comfortable in certain scenarios with conflict because I felt like I was overpowering and I was just young and I was just trying to be the best I could at that time in my early 20s. And so I remember leaning on the sandwich method for so long. And then once I realized how destructive that was and unproductive, it was like this light bulb. And now I'm like, you know what? I owe it to people to tell them the truth. And I owe it to people to share what's in my brain that they may not have access to that will help them. And so that like shift for me in like my mid 20s was quite significant. But yeah, so I'm all for the conflict, Kurt.
Yeah, I think so, a lot of it for me is setting realistic expectations. And so that's one, if we're going to have a difficult conversation, I should tell you we're going to have a difficult conversation. I should tell you, hey, I'm feeling like we're not hitting the numbers and it's been this amount of time, and that's what I want to talk about. Now, you may have some dread for just a little while, but it's going to be very clear what we're walking into. The next part that I find is, especially to really grow revenue and sales and earnings, is I should come with strong opinions and I should hold them loosely. If I'm going to tell you, hey, I feel like we're not hitting the sales numbers, I feel like we're not hitting the marketing numbers, that's the topic. But I'm also going to come in and say, clearly, I think that we're not hitting the numbers, but if I'm missing something, if I should be looking at this differently, you have time to prepare for that versus just beginning, hit with a 2x4 figuratively upside your head. Like, I might not be thinking about it. We spoke earlier about large language models and direct traffic. Like, you need to be able to, as the marketer, have time to be able to come back and say, this is what the data looks like. And then as the boss, like, be open to hearing that, You may still let the person go. You may still need to shift things, but you've set it up front versus just like, hey, to your point, the sandwich method. Let's not do that.
Let's not do that. Yeah, I've been hitting up that upside the head with a couple 2x4s in my life, and you know what? It's like that is when the true test of responding over reacting comes into play in your maturity level. So,
well, it happens as well in the maturity when you've had that difficult conversation and both sides have agreed that something needs to change. Well, you need to make sure that you have allowed time for it to change versus just coming back emotionally and being like, well, we spoke about it 30 days ago. If your agreement was it will take 60 to 90 days to roll out the new plan, well, then don't just keep coming back and kind of like nuance the person to death on that. Like give them time, ask for check-ins, but like allow that time to breathe as well.
100%. So that takes us into a great conversation that I love is on servant leadership and how it impacts the high performance culture. So you're known as a servant leader, and I think that there's lots of different types of leaders out there. So first, please give us your definition of what a servant leader is and how they act. And then also, of course, how it ties back to the high performance culture.
Yeah, I think there's lots of flavors of leadership, but I think there's only two types of leaders. I think there's an authoritative leader that says, do what I say, how I say it, in the time frame that I say, or there's, even if they're a nice person, it's, or you're fired. And the servant leader comes in, and I still want the outcomes, but the servant leader comes in and acknowledges the moment I've hired you, back to what we spoke about outcomes, I've hired you to reach business outcomes that I want. At which point, since I'm not doing your job, my job is to serve you to help you reach the business outcomes that I want. That may mean taking sales calls with you, may mean showing you how to do it. But my job is to help serve you to reach those business outcomes that I want. Everything else between those, that binary split is just a flavor of how you implement that. You can be a nice person and be an authoritative leader. You can be a super direct, short curt person and be a servant leader. So it is that approach of who you bring in and how you treat them once they're there.
Yeah, I love that distinction. I haven't heard it said that way, but I think you're 100% correct. And especially, like, I love talking about the next generation, because as much as Gen Zers drive a lot of us bananas because of their style of working, their ethic, their commitment, their huge need for coaching and support that is constant. But one thing is that, like, we can't get away from this. Like, they're going to come up the ranks. They're going to age to the point we're going to have to hire all of them. There's nothing we can do about it, right? So how do you bring, and like, I'm an elder millennial, and we did a lot of things to work culture, like working remote, for example, started with, my generation. So with the Gen Zers, the research that I have done is that the servant leader is the one that will be able to get Gen Zers to actually thrive. And the reason why is because with servant leaders, they are invested in that person's growth, right? Not just the company's outcome, but the person's growth. So all of the research says the Gen Zers actually attach themselves to leaders, not companies anymore. So that is a really important thing for everybody to pay attention to, because you're not going to have lifers because that's the tire company I bought my tires from and I'm going to work for them for the rest of my life. The lifers are tied to the leaders, and that gets really complex, actually.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But for me, I think coaching the Gen Zers, empathy, which is, people put that up as the number one trait of a servant leader. I'm like, no, that's no different than coaching. It's a tool, like a hammer in my toolbox, that there are times to use it and there are times you need to use other tools. And so for me, I always simplify it down, like in my keynotes, to do you want compliance or do you want commitment? Because authoritative leadership will get you the compliance. Make the phone calls, hit the numbers, enter your notes. The commitment side of it says, no, help me grow revenue. This is what we're trying to do. Compliance says, if you don't hit your numbers this week, you're out. Commitment on the other side says, I acknowledge that you may get thrust into elder care or have a sick kid or get sick yourself. And what I'm wanting is the outcomes over 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. And like, hey, I've been sick with the flu and colds. Every member of my family has a cold, flu, and cold again. So I was probably a lot less effective for the last 4 weeks, but I'm still the best employee you would have gotten in a quarter. That's what you get from a commitment approach versus a compliance approach.
Well, this has been an amazing episode, and I am so excited to share this one in a few weeks with my audience. But what we have to do before we end is, what is the most rascal thing you have done in business?
Almost every company I join, I will call between 10 and 30 of the past customers. Sometimes I will pay them and I will never resell them. I will call them just to understand why, what they thought about us ahead of time. And it freaks the sales team out all the time.
What is the most, I'm curious, in those interviews, does one stand out as particularly shocking, especially when it comes to the sales team?
I have had multiple times people say, I love the company, but the salesperson is the reason. This named salesperson is the reason that I did not come back. And
interesting.
So how do you share that in a way that that's always the hardest thing when it's something that comes up, because you have to diagnose was it a personality thing or was it that individual?
Yes. I think that's pretty powerful. I can think of a company right now that I would say that about the salesperson. Completely, took advantage of the situation and did some really pretty unethical things. And it's a large corporation. So I'm not sure if my feedback will ever make it up, but they have it. They can do what they like with it. All right. Well, Kurt, tell my audience how they can find you and learn from you.
Visit me at my own personal website at Kurt Uhlir, UHLIR.com, especially if you're interested about servant leadership, because I do have a business case for servant leadership that will walk you through my approach to the framework of a polar approach to what leadership and high growth actually looks like.
Well, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. And I'm looking forward to you tagging me in that LinkedIn article tomorrow so I can do some continued learning of my own. So thanks so much, Kurt.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Revenue Rascals, where we turn bold ideas into predictable revenue and prove that breaking the rules can still build empires. If you love what you heard, do me a favor. Tap the links in the show notes to support our sponsors. They're the ones keeping this show free so I can keep ungating the six-figure strategies that help you scale faster, lead smarter, and take more freedom home with you. And hey, if you think you'd make an incredible guest or know someone who's built something worth studying, email me at hello@michelleterpster.com. And until next time, stay sharp, stay bold, and stay just a little bit rascal.